I've got a couple of updates coming directly from the Small Business Administration Press Office regarding the Emergency Economic Injury Disaster Loan Grant Program for the full disbursement of the $10,000 Economic Injury Disaster Loan Grant, even if you do not live in a low-income community and you did not suffer a greater than 30% revenue loss during an 8-week period in 2020 when compared to an 8-week period in 2019. As you very well know, I dropped yesterday's video where I read the letter from the Small Business Administration Administrator Isabel Guzman to Nevada Senator Jackie Rosen, who engineered S.4227 that would mandate the Small Business Administration disperse the full $10,000 Economic Injury Disaster Loan Grant to all legitimate small business applicants, and S.513, co-sponsored by Republican from Texas, John Cornyn, Senator John Cornyn, where Isabel Guzman writes that there are a number of people that are pressing the Small Business Administration to continue disbursing grants pursuant to the CARES Act, Section 110, subsection E, and basically that part reads, many people are calling on SBA to reverse the prior administration's policy concerning the original EIDL advance in hopes that we can provide additional grant funds to those businesses that do not qualify for the Targeted EIDL Advance Program. SBA does not have the statutory authority required to take action on these requests without new legislation that either appropriates additional funds for EIDL advances or that makes changes to the existing eligibility criteria for the Targeted EIDL Advance Program. So, she said, Ms. Guzman stated that, or Administrator Guzman, pardon me, writes that they do not have the power in order to administer a program to disperse economic injury disaster loan grants to organizations that do not qualify for the Targeted EIDL Advance Program. I went ahead and reached out to the Small Business Administration Press Office and I asked them about this months ago, back in January 2021, because I told them it's clear that the SBA is doing a great job in putting in operation the Targeted Economic Injury Disaster Loan Grant Program. But what about the Emergency EIDL Grant Program pursuant to Section 332 of HR 133, the disaster relief package that passed in December? And I basically put up a scenario for them. What happens in the following scenario that several people in my community of small business owners encounter? A small business owner, one employee, applies for an EIDL, received $1,000 in 2020. This applicant does not qualify pursuant to Section 331. The applicant therefore only received $1,000, but pursuant to Section 332, the SBA must pay out a full $10,000 grant. How can this business owner request the rest of the money that he should receive or she should receive pursuant to Section 332 of HR 133? So, I have been through some of this before. I'll just go ahead, but I got another update. So, basically, I asked them about it again. I sent them another email February 2nd, 2021, and Carol Wilkerson from the press office wrote back, writing, thanks for your email, we will be in touch. So, I went ahead and followed up with them yesterday, yes, the 16th. Hi, Carol Andrew. Hope you had a great week. Any word on the EIDL Advance Program pursuant to the modification of the CARES Act included in Section 332 of HR 133? And then I got an automated reply from Ms. Wilkerson that read that I should contact Cecilia Taylor. I went ahead and contacted Cecilia Taylor over at the Small Business Administration Press Office, asked her the same thing, and she referred me to Ms. Tiffany Clement. She is a public affairs officer, if I'm not mistaken. I believe that's her title. Forgive me if I'm wrong. Okay, so yes, Tiffany did indeed follow up. So Tiffany responded to me by writing the following. Hi, Neil. It appears that there is some confusion about 3 discrete programs enacted in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The CARES Act appropriated $20 billion for the original EIDL Advance Program. The money was exhausted in July 2020. The $20 billion appropriated by the Consolidated Appropriations Act 2021, which was signed into law December 27, 2020, was specifically for the Targeted EIDL Advance Program. The American Rescue Plan Act, signed in March, appropriated an additional $10 billion for the Targeted EIDL Advance Program. created the Supplemental Targeted Advance Program, which benefits the smallest business hardest hit by the pandemic, and appropriated an additional $5 billion for that program. That's $5,000 to businesses who suffered a greater than 50% loss, pursuant to the American Rescue Plan Act. To answer your question, many people are calling on the SBA to provide additional grant funds to those businesses that do not qualify for the Targeted EIDL Advance Program. Feel free to read through the rest of it because Ms. Clements is clearly relaying the information that Administrator Guzman wrote to Senator Jackie Rosen. So, and I went ahead and continued to break it down for her. I said, listen, there was, all right, you see how, okay, so, pursuant to 331 of the CAA, there was $20 billion for 331, as you very well know. However, there was another $20 billion for Section 332. Why? Because they edited the amount appropriated for emergency economic injury disaster loan grants to be disbursed at $10,000 for each business from $20 billion to $40 billion, which modifies the language of the CARES Act to have the SBA disperse full $10,000 EIDL grants through December 31st, 2021. It even calls the program something completely different than Section 332, the Emergency EIDL Grant Program. I asked you, do you see how Congress changed the original $20 billion that Administrator Guzman writes was exhausted in July 2020 to $40 billion? So, an additional $40 billion, additional $20 billion pursuant to Section 332. It modified that original program. In addition, Congress appropriated another $20 billion for Section 331 for the Targeted EIDL program. Just to recap, there's $20 billion for Section 331, $20 billion for 332. So again, will an applicant that qualifies for an Emergency EIDL grant have to file an application for another EIDL with the option to request a $10,000 grant? If so, when will that application portal open, or does the SBA interpret the law differently? Thank you so much, et cetera, et cetera. So I took the liberty of editing the CARES Act, Section 1110, pursuant to Section 332 of H.R. 1332 of Section 332 of the H.R. 133, the Consolidated Appropriations Act. And these are the edits, basically, that it instructs you to perform. So if you take a look, okay, Section 332. Right here. Section 1110 of the CARES Act is amended in subsection A1 by striking December 31st, 2020. So I went ahead and took out December 31st, 2020 and basically included December 31st, 2021. The term eligibility entity means a business with not more than 500 employees, any individual who operates in their sole proprietorship with or without employees, or as independent contractor. All right, so I don't have to read through this entire edit, just basically that I edited. All right, that the Small Business Administration could continue to disburse emergency EIDL grants through December 31st, 2021. So that program is not complete as yet. So if you continue to read through the bill, it reads, in subsection D, by striking paragraphs 1 and 2 and inserting the following: approve an applicant based solely on the credit score of the applicant or by using an alternative appropriate methods to determine an applicant's ability to repay, and faster, use information from the Department of the Treasury that confirmed that an applicant is eligible to receive such a loan, or the information contained in an application for such loan is accurate. Bam. So I went ahead and took a look at that section right here. Right here. So I struck paragraph 1 and 2. This is paragraph 1 and 2 right here. I took it out. Anything that you see in between these stars, it's stricken pursuant to 332, and I went ahead and added the new paragraph. Approve an applicant based solely on any credit score of the applicant or by using alternative appropriate methods to determine an applicant's ability to repay, and use information from the Department of the Treasury to confirm that an applicant is eligible to receive such a loan. The information contained in an application for such a loan is accurate. Right. Then, if you continue to read through the act, you also want to, in subsection E, in paragraph 1, you strike during the covered period and insert the following. So we take out during the covered period. Here's a pattern interrupt. Pay attention. I know this stuff gets wicked. Because listen, I did this yesterday and I did it this morning after eating my macronutrient balanced breakfast to ensure that I did it right. So I did it again, just to ensure that I've got it in the cortex, that I got it right. I proofread this thing several times. If you catch me where I'm wrong in any of the steps that I took, feel free to let me know in the comment section below. We'll go ahead and correct it next time. Anyway, so in subsection E, paragraph 1, we take out during the covered period and add advances. During the covered period, an entity included for eligibility in subsection, including small business concerns, private nonprofit organizations, and small agricultural cooperatives that apply for a loan under section 7B2. I'm just doing this so you know you can stay on top. I know this gets highly technical. I'm not a lawyer, however, but I am a bit of an English scholar. Got a scholarship at NYU because I did well in my creative writing classes, and I got nominated for the scholarship through the department head over in English. All right, I digress. I'm sorry. Advances. During the covered period, an entity included for eligibility in subsection B, including small business concerns, private nonprofit organizations, and small agricultural cooperatives that applies for a loan under section of the Small Business Act in response to the virus may request that the administrator provide an advance that is subject to paragraph 3 in the amount requested by such applicant to such applicant. And then HR 133 instructs you to, by striking during the covered period and inserting the following. You enter in the advances part. Did I just read that? Okay. Feel free to backtrack the video to take a look at how I did all this, all right? And it's right here. I'm trying to make it as clear as possible. It's highly technical stuff. But you should understand this material to know that you have a right to these funds. In subparagraph A, as so designated by striking within 3 days of the administrator received an application from such applicant. So, where it reads 3 days, so you guys remember that they were supposed to, in the amount requested by such applicant to such applicant. Okay? During the covered period. All right, so if you apply for a loan under 7B2, in other words, for an economic injury disaster loan, reads in the amount requested, and then this is, in response, may request that the administrator provide an advance that is subject to paragraph 3 in the amount requested by such applicant to such applicant. We strike out within 3 days after the administrator received an application from such applicant, and then add the timing. This is the new timing. With respect to each request submitted to the administrator under subparagraph A, the administrator shall not later than 21 days after the date on which the administrator receives the request verify that the entity is an entity that is eligible for a loan made under section 7B2, in other words, for an EIDL. In other words, the Small Business Administration has to verify that you are eligible under their criteria to receive an economic injury disaster loan. If the administrator under clause I verifies that the entity submitting the request is an entity that is eligible as described in that clause, provide the advance requested by the entity, and with respect to the entity that the administrator determines is not entitled to receive an advance under this subsection, provide the entity with a notification explaining why the administrator reached that determination. So, within 21 days time, right? After a small business owner, an applicant for the economic injury disaster loan, requests $10,000 economic injury disaster loan, the administrator, Small Business Administration, has to verify whether you're actually eligible, whether you qualify. And if you qualify, if the administrator under clause I verifies that the entity submitting the request is an entity that is eligible, in other words, you qualify, ding, ding, ding. Under clause I, verifies the entity submitting the request is an entity that is eligible, as described in that clause, provide the advance requested by the entity. Okay? The administrator, just go ahead and take a look at this. The administrator shall not later than 21 days after the date on, and you can just go directly to it. If the administrator under clause I verifies that the entity submitting the request is an entity that is eligible, as described in that clause, provide the advance requested by the entity. I don't know, it's clear as day. They even gave this thing a whole, look at this is a different program than the Targeted EIDL program. It's the Emergency Grant. This is the Emergency EIDL Grant program. And it is titled so under section 332 of HR 133, the Consolidated Appropriations Act. See, Emergency EIDL Grants. It's another program. And then, this is going to boggle your head. Hopefully it doesn't explode. Figuratively, it'll explode, okay? Keep some fish oil and magnesium on the side, just in case you get a headache. Anyway, not magnesium. Magnesium will put you to sleep. verification. So you've probably read the rest of this stuff. This is old material. Most of the stuff that's highlighted, I have to remember, is this is, yes, during the covered period. I just want to make sure that this is the new stuff. Just take a look at that. They're supposed to provide the economic injury disaster loan grant within 21 days time. And it shall. Yes, it reads that a small business owner applicant of an economic injury disaster loan grant may request that the administrator provide an advance that is subject to paragraph 3. They may do that, right? And that is where it makes sense why the federal courts found that the Small Business Administration didn't indeed have to disburse full $10,000 economic injury disaster loan grants. They had the discretion to disburse at $1,000. They could have given you $50 per employee if they wanted to. I know it would have been mayhem, of course. They don't want to do anything like that because at the end of the day, small businesses constitute the 99.9% of all U.S. businesses, period. So they don't want to give you $50 per employee. Regardless of $1,000, you know it's not enough. So this is what basically emphasizes that this is a completely different program. Because look, take a look. Authorization of appropriations. Go ahead and take a look at 133 again. I hope I did not get too complex. If I did, maybe I'll do a live and I'll go ahead and break this down a little bit more simpler. I get a bit excited when I'm talking about this stuff. All right, so in paragraph 7, so respect to an entity, this is all the stuff that we had to enter. We just read you that stuff, right? In 21 days, they have to verify all this. Okay? All right, so this is what I just read to you. The timing, within 21 days, they either have to verify that you're eligible and then disburse the grant that you request, or tell you, with respect to an entity that the administrator determines is not entitled to receive an advance in this subsection, provide the entity with a notification explaining why. They have to tell you why you are not an eligible entity. In paragraph 7, by striking $20 billion and inserting $40 billion. Now, if you look at the original CARES Act, it's $10 billion, but they actually provided an additional, they appropriated an additional $10 billion, so it was a $20 billion. So let's take a look. And when I went ahead and took that out. Took out the $10 billion and I inserted $40 billion. So this was at $20 billion because Congress appropriated an additional $10 billion. There's $20 billion right here. Where's that money at? Why? What do I ask this? Because there's $20 billion for this program. Now let's take a look at section 331 real quick, which is crazy. All right. So that's 332. There's $20 billion. You see it there, right? $20 billion. Take a look. This is section 331. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. You see it's section 331. I'll go ahead and just scroll up real quick so you can take a look. You have to be in a low-income community. You know all this stuff already. If you don't, 331, right? This is section 331. Now, you scroll all the way down to the amount of money that Congress appropriated for this program. And you take a look. There are authorized to be appropriated to the administrator $20 billion to carry out this section, which shall remain available through December 31st, 2021, of which $20,000 for the Inspector General. And that is what Administrator Guzman confirmed, right? They got $20 billion pursuant to the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021 in December, $20 billion, then they got an additional $10 billion pursuant to the American Rescue Plan. So where's the $20 billion for section 332? That's what I'm talking. Where's that money at? Right? I went ahead and sent them an email regarding this. And did I tell you what they said regarding? Yeah, so they basically, this is yeah, I got deep into the numbers over here. Okay, into the statutory language, excuse me. So again, with an applicant who qualifies, right? And I just showed you how there's $20 billion there. All right? Miss Carol Wilkerson got back to me. She said, please stay tuned for additional information on SBA.gov. I believe you connected with Ms. Tiffany Clemens, who may be addressed many of your questions earlier on EIDL. And I appreciate Ms. Clemens for that. Absolutely. She did definitely address that. She also addressed questions in regards to the 24 month of working capital economic injury disaster loan increase. However, where are those 20 billion? That's why we have to contact sbc.senate.gov. Let them know about this stuff right here. Small Business Owners Guide, resources for small businesses, what's happened. They've got a contact page. The about page, and then from there you can get the contact right here. See this? FAQ, contact information. And you tell them, you appropriated $20 billion. They engineered this program. $20 billion for Section 332. The way that the federal judges last year ruled, it made sense because the CARES Act never mandated the Small Business Administration to do anything. It simply read that a small business owner that is classified as an eligible entity for an economic injury disaster loan may request. Nowhere did it read that the administration or the administrator, the Small Business Administration, had to disburse those funds. So it made sense. And the judge also ruled that based on other statute, the Small Business Administration had discretion. And they did have the discretion to go ahead and do so. This, however, there's $20 billion there. And then, as you clearly can see, the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021 basically mandates, because it reads that you shall this time. You shall this time. You see it. See how it reads? Again, we'll take a look at it again because it's just so important for you to understand this. Time and respect. Within 21 days, if the administrator under Clause I verifies the entity submitting the request is an entity that is eligible as described in that clause, provide the advance requested by the entity. And right here it reads, the administrator shall, not later than 21 days after the date on which the administrator receives the request, if the administrator under Clause I verifies the entity submitting the requested entity that is eligible as described in that clause, provide the advance requested by the entity. They've got to provide that advance. It's right there. It's clear. It's English. It's our language, right? And here are some questions to which the Small Business Administration Press Office responded in regards to the $2 million economic injury disaster loan cap. Okay, so again, Ms. Tiffany Clemens, she got back to me. Thank you so much. We are working diligently to make the internal changes necessary to implement the increase to the $2 million statutory limit, including the technology changes. So when will the SBA increase the EIDL limit? That's her response. Feel free to read it. Go ahead and rewind the tape. Like if this is tape, you guys don't even know what tape is. Tape is something we used to do back when we used to dodge dinosaur stomps. What is the qualification criteria for an EIDL equal to 24 months of working capital? I'm older than water, man. I was probably the first guy to take a sip of water. Anyway, an eligible business entity will qualify for 24 months of economic injury disaster loan working capital, up to maximum of $500,000 for small businesses. 24 months of economic injury is calculated by gross annual revenues less annual cost of goods sold multiplied by 2. I didn't know whether they were going to have you subtract cost of goods sold. For agricultural enterprises and nonprofits, 24 months of economic injury is equal to 24 months of operating expenses. So they don't have to subtract cost of goods sold. If a small business owner applies for a loan equal to 24 months of working capital, how long will it take the SBA to approve? We are experiencing a high volume of requests for loan increases, right? To date, we've approved over 3.8 million loans for over $205 billion, almost exclusively under the previous limits of 6 months working capital to a maximum of $150,000. So you can appreciate the magnitude of the task we're handling. So they got a big workload, but they're working on it. So at least we know that they are working on that. That's something that's in process. We are processing increase request. When can applicants who request an increase sending an email to increase request at SBA expect a response? You remember you received an email and it read that you can potentially receive more money from the Small Business Administration. Just go ahead and send an email to that email, EIDL increase request at SBA.gov. We are processing increase request in the order received. All borrowers who request a loan increase to the mailbox will receive the next step instructions between April 22nd and 26th. We are asking applicants do not send multiple requests, as the additional emails will slow the overall response time. So do not send any more emails to that email. Okay. All right. So I found a report that the SBA will deduct the amount of EIDL advance grant the agency dispersed to a small business owner from the total amount of EIDL increase for which an applicant is approved. So basically, if the Small Business Administration gave you a grant of $10,000, and let's say pursuant to this new policy, they give you a loan of, let's say, $60,000, then they have to deduct the $10,000 they already gave you from the $60,000 they will lend you. So they'll only give you $50,000. Now I ask them whether the same policy applies to a loan. So if you receive an economic injury disaster loan for X amount of dollars, will that also be deducted from the increase and then give you a loan amount of Y amount of dollars? The report may have been referring to the provision of the CARES Act that required. All right, so no, it has nothing to do with the PPP. That requirement was repealed. Okay, so we're not talking about the PPP. With regard to loan increases, EIDLs are SBA's working capital loans. They're not separate products. That said, if a business received a $24,000 loan, I gave her a scenario, a hypothetical scenario. If a business received a $24,000 EIDL based on the previous limit of 6 months, so if you got a $24,000 economic injury disaster loan in 2020 based off the 6 months of working capital minus cost of goods sold, and SBA approves an increase to 24 months of working capital, the $96,000 figure, and the borrower would receive an additional $72,000. It would then be considered a single loan for $96,000. So the additional amount for which you qualify will actually join the amount that you already received. So you'll get the increase. You'll get 24 months of working capital minus the amount of economic injury disaster loan that the Small Business Administration has already dispersed to you. Will the SBA require tax records? Yes. And what years? We will recommend applicants have filed their 2019 federal tax returns before applying. Use the figures from that return when completing their application. What can people do? I've not heard a response. A number of you keep saying, SBA hasn't done anything for me. Questions about SBA EIDL loans and loan applications can be emailed to Disaster Customer Service, SBA.gov, or directed to SBA's Customer Service Center at 800-659-295 from 8 to 8 Eastern Time, 7 days a week. But as I told you, in regards to Section 332, let's go ahead and first start to contact. We're going to contact all of our elected representatives and be very respectful when you go ahead and contact. After all, they were elected. However, and listen, go ahead and watch my videos. You know my library. I've given you the evidence on how everybody worked together. Congress gave the Small Business Administration the discretion in order to disperse grants as they saw fit. Congress gave them that, so they all operated together in this. Okay? So I know exactly what's been going on, and I've shown you the proof. So let's go ahead and speak to these people. The U.S. Senate Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship, because this time it's not solely about congressional intent. Before, the judges had the argument, listen, congressional intent, get out of here, because all of these senators, congressional intent was that they dispersed the full $10,000. Why don't they disperse? Forget about congressional intent. What did the law read? They signed that law that gave the Small Business Administration the discretion. So we have to start to speak to them and see what's going on. Where are those $20 billion appropriated for Section 332 for the full disbursement of the $10,000 economic injury disaster loan grant to all legitimate small business applicants, even if you do not operate your business in a low-income community and you did not suffer a greater than 30% revenue loss during an 8-week period in 2020 when compared to another 8-week period in 2019.